my life fades, the vision dims. All that remains are memories.
My earliest memory of Mad Max is grabbing the VHS tape from the store and popping it into the VHS player when I was about 12. I remember the thrills, the excitement, and that I'd never seen anything like this before. It was so different from many mainstream films around that time, and was so crazy that the title says it all. I've been a massive fan of the series ever since then. I've watched all of the films, all of the numerous rip-offs that were scattered all around the 80s and 90s, such as Battlestorm and Waterworld 2. But what really makes Mad Max so popular? What is it about these films that make people want to come back to them again and again, and even to go as far as to build and collect vehicles and costumes that were in these films? To answer these questions, we have to go back to the beginning with an Australian medical doctor named George Miller. In the 1970s, Miller was working in St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney in the emergency ward, where he saw many injuries and deaths that were later depicted in Mad Max. While studying for his doctorate, Miller was also taking a film course at the Melbourne University, where he started up a production company with his friend Byron Kennedy. Miller started writing the script for Mad Max with the general idea that people would do anything to keep vehicles moving. In the autumn of 1979, Mad Max hit the big screen in Australia, and shortly after worldwide, making a massive impact and becoming a big success. 2 sequels to this film were made, Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which were met with the same praise and success as the first picture. Mad Max nowadays has become a pop culture phenomenon that has spawned video games, conventions held in Broken Hill where they filmed The Road Warrior, and another sequel, Mad Max Fury Road. With a franchise this extensive, there has to be a reason that 41 years later, audiences are still waiting for more content from these particular sci-fi films. To help me answer this question, and more, I've gone to the University of South Australia McGill campus, where I'll be talking to Dr. Saige Walton and Dr. Stuart Richards, who are both lecturers and experts on film and television. Firstly, I will be interviewing Dr. Walton to see if she can help me answer some of the numerous questions that I have. So, what is your opinion of the Mad Max films, and do you like them?
I do like them. I don't like all of them equally. My favourite is The Road Warrior, the second film, which I used to teach. I do like them, but I do think they become more and more crazy as the franchise progresses, for good or for bad.
Okay. And how do you think the Mad Max trilogy has made an impact on Australian film?
So I would situate the Mad Max trilogy as part of what's called the Australian New Wave, the resurgence of Australian filmmaking that happened during the 70s and 80s. And there were 2 particular strands of that, I guess. One was the more arty strand, I guess the more respectable strand, which was known internationally. So films like Picnic at Hanging Rock and My Brilliant Career. But there was another strand, which was more about genre filmmaking, and it had its roots in more low budget exploitation production, or what's called Oz-sploitation. And I think Miller kind of brought genre filmmaking and that kind of tradition of Australian cinema more to the mainstream, and he made it much more kind of visible and accessible, not just in Australia but internationally, particularly with the first couple of films.
Okay. And how do you think Mad Max has made an impact on filmmaking worldwide?
Well, it has a huge international fandom around it, for sure. In fact, it'd be interesting to kind of track what were the favourite kind of films. I know most people, well, maybe of an older generation like me, are staunch kind of defenders of the second one. But I think worldwide, like, its impact has been, like, as the series has progressed, Miller kind of carved out a space that was more about the blockbuster, and the films become much more in that kind of blockbuster mode, and bringing Australian cinema to an international audience in that blockbuster mode, but through the lens of genre. So I think that was his contribution.
And what are your thoughts on Mad Max Fury Road?
I like it, and I remember really enjoying watching it at the cinema. It's high octane, adrenaline film, but I think its logic is far more to do with action cinema, than the other films, which have stronger connections with things like exploitation, as I mentioned, even the Western, and the kind of revenge plot of the Western, which drives the first couple of films. So I do like it, but to me it moves differently, and that's because it's more dependent on, well, VFX for the stunts and the chases, rather than kind of the stunts of the second one. That's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it just moves in a different way. It has a different pacing. But I still really like it, and I love the character of Furiosa. And I think, it's her film as much as Max's.
Very much so. And so what are your thoughts on some of the numerous rip-offs of Mad Max in the 80s?
So I think it's telling that I don't know of them, or I have heard of them, but I haven't actually watched them. So the one that I do know is Waterworld, which sounds like, well, I have seen it, but I don't remember very little of it, that it was an epic failure. So for all of its budget, it didn't kind of capitalize on an audience or draw an audience in the way that kind of Miller did. And I guess what's interesting is that from memory, the second Mad Max film was like 9 times the budget of the original one. So by the time you get to Mad Max Fury Road, which is working on a much more epic grand scale, and that's probably the most financially successful. So I think that the rip-offs are probably best forgotten.
That's probably a good idea. Well, thank you so much for your time, Miss.
You're welcome.
I have gained some valuable insight from Dr. Walton. Now I'll be interviewing Dr. Stuart Richards about the Mad Max films. He specialises in Australian film and teaches a popular culture course that may be vital to answering some of these questions. So, Dr. Richards, what is your opinion of the Mad Max films, and do you like them?
I think they're really important films in the history of Australian cinema. They were part of a resurgence during the Australian New Wave, and they are a part of what we refer to as Ozploitation films. So these are exploitation films shot in Australia that feature lots of car crashes, violence, and general thrillers. I think I like Thunderdome more. I think the first one is quite a rough film, but it's what I guess got George Miller his name and kickstarted the trilogy. I think there are some issues with the second film, particularly in terms of the representation of the humongous group, particularly, I guess, them being queer villains. But once we get Tina Turner in the Thunderdome, that's when I think it really hits its stride.
Very nice. And so, how do you think has the Mad Max trilogy made an impact on Australian film?
Well, I think it greatly influenced the Ozploitation genre. It really started, or was a part of that subgenre of dangerous, thrilling Australian cinema. And it really capitalised on the post-apocalyptic themes of the Australian landscape and how fitting our country is for that genre.
And how do you think Mad Max made an impact worldwide?
Well, I think the post-apocalyptic genre is really important to consider, as a lot of major directors who have filmed post-apocalyptic films, James Cameron, David Fincher, the Saw series have acknowledged the Mad Max trilogy. Even in video games such as the Fallout series have all cited Mad Max films as their inspiration for how punk an apocalypse should look like.
And what do you think of the numerous rip-offs such as Waterworld or Battletron?
Haven't seen many, though I do love Waterworld. I think they are, I guess, cashing in on that apocalyptic genre, and that's what the exploitation film does. You want to see an apocalyptic landscape of many people dying in fiery crashes, and that's what you get from those films. So they might not be great, but they do what they say in the box.
And what are your thoughts on Mad Max Fury Road?
I think it's one of my favourite Mad Max films. I think there is a real feminist anger to the film, which I love in Charlize Theron's character. I think it's indicative of Screen Australia's push for supporting major blockbusters, though, at the expense of smaller independent productions. And I do wish we had some more Australian names in the main cast, but I do love it. It's good fun.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Richards.
Thank you.
With the films being so violent, thrilling, and exploiting the latest trends at the time, it has turned Mad Max into a powerhouse. The themes and features of the Mad Max films, such as revenge, post-apocalyptic societies, and good versus evil, are themes that stand the test of time and make the films as popular as they were back then, still extremely popular now. There is a cult following in the post-apocalyptic genre, and the Mad Max films are a classic and probably the best example of this genre. The Mad Max films have become immortalised in Australian cinema because of the direction that Miller took, with the use of practical effects, modern themes, and brilliant actors that really bring his stories across. These films have become one of the biggest franchises to this day, spawning comic books, video games, more sequels, and launched the careers of George Miller and Mel Gibson.